Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining in. We are currently facing some network issues at office, but we'll be fine soon. Give me a moment. Let me introduce you guys to the session and what we are up to today. I would be glad to know where all of you have joined us in from. It's great to have so many people join in this morning. So thank you so much. Let's just start out. I hope you guys can hear me. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Sachin. So, yes. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another dock and roll session with FlytBase. I'm Shruti from FlytBase, and I'm really excited about today's session because it's going to be a little different from the usual webinar format. We're not doing slides today. We are not doing product walkthrough as well. This is just a normal conversation that you have with another security leader. Joining me today is Reese Anderson, the founder and CEO of OvrWatch. He is someone who's fascinated with real deployment in autonomous drone operation. Reese has worked closely with actionable before. There's another webinar with him that you can find on our website. And this was a citywide DFR program. And now he's taking those lessons into an entirely new space, campus security. Over the next hour, we'll break this down into three parts. Listen carefully. The first part will be where we'll dive into the DFR story with actual PD, what it really took to build that entire system. The second part would be about why OvrWatch is now focused on campus security and how that connects to the future of autonomous drones. And finally, we unpack the solutioning mindset, the tools, the choices, and the lessons that makes autonomy actually work in the field. So whether you're joining in as a system integrator, an enterprise security lead, or just someone curious about where autonomy is headed, you will get to hear directly from someone who's been building this for real. Reese, great to have you here. Let's start with Ashwell. But before that, let me not forget to introduce our own member, Deep, who's the associate for the NASA region for FlightBase. He'll be the one leading this entire session. So welcome, Deep and Reese.
Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction, Shruti.
Um,
Just waiting for the Reese to stage. Yeah.
yeah, Reese is here.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
How's it going?
All good. How about you?
Doing good. Just well, it's good to be here.
Awesome. So I'll just dive right in into the first topic that we have to discuss. So like Reese, a lot of people know Overwatch from the disaster response space. Like that's what you did last year after the Hurricane Helene, came over Asheville. But not everyone knows that experience is shaping what comes next in security for you. So can you please start and give us a background about Overwatch and what you did with Asheville?
Yeah. So it was we're kind of looking to see at that point, hey, how can we help? How can we do something that makes sense for multiple different situations? And this whole hurricane thing was going on, so it's one of those where they didn't know us at all. They didn't know who we are, what we're doing, and I think for the most part, it's our vision, it's our understanding of like what can be done or what could not be done, and you have to kind of find opportunities to be like, hey, let's prove this and let's show what we're capable of, stuff like that. So it was a good opportunity for us to go to a location and go to a situation that needs help and show them, something that we felt like could make a difference. And so we actually started kind of small. We started with like, I don't know, 4 docs, and then we decided to grow it from there. But we kind of said, hey, Captain Moore, hey, can we test this out, see what's going on, and I think we've kind of talked about this maybe before, but he probably thought, I don't even know if these guys are going to show up with docs or whatever, So it was, but for us, the reason why I kind of mentioned all that is just, it was, for me, it's always been about like, why are we choosing to do this? Like, what are we going to accomplish by saying, hey, we can do X, Y, and Z? And I think by putting in, the effort to really put our, I guess where our money, where our mouth is, or make sure that we can say, like, if we talk our game, we wanted to be able to like show it. So we figured it was a good option. We said, hey, this is something we'll do, like, just to get started. And I think from the beginning, like, the reason why it made sense in Asheville is mostly because of the like organization and the people there, and just they said, hey, we believe if we were able to do something like this, it could really grow. We believe if we could show, the rest of the country, what this is capable of, or, show the city and the state and all that, like, we'll get a lot of other people on board, and then they'll, the technology will continue to expand, and they'll see, So I think the biggest goal, and this is in general, the biggest goal for us was just kind of just to get the first win or get the first success out of it and show that it was valid. And so, I guess to talk about that as a whole, that whole entire thing that we did, it was, hey, let's go there, let's set it up, let's see what we can accomplish. We know what we can do. We talked to you guys, ahead of time too. Hey, we're gonna do this. Are you guys in? And you guys said, probably thought we were crazy a little bit, but we we all agreed, like, all right, let's go test this out. And I think it was, for me, the reason why I talk about that is because it was solving multiple different um, like tests for us. It wasn't just about like the hurricane. It wasn't just about security or just about anything specific. It was, well, how do I get the public involved in a situation where they can feel like we're taking care of the community, or that we're like pro community. How do we get businesses involved, and how do we take this entire vision and show that it can be done on a wider spread area, and in coordination with maybe multiple agencies, and how does all that look, putting all that together, I guess, is the question. And I don't think that, like, just to be really clear, I don't think that it could have been done, until we had the buy-in from Asheville, and that the leadership there was on the same page. And so when all that kind of looked like, hey, this makes sense and everybody's on the same page, like, I wouldn't have done it if I didn't feel like he was along the same train of thought as me. So I think for the most part, and I don't know if this helped anybody, but it's just getting that buy-in from the correct people is probably one of the most difficult things to do. And I know I've seen a lot of programs or a lot of situations get propped up, or they get like proposed and thought about, and a lot of times it's just it's the people who are making decisions that sometimes either don't fully agree. And I think what was really, really cool about Asheville is it was, hey, what do you want to do? Let's figure it out. Let's try it all, and that's what I love about that whole situation, is that we were able to see, okay, well, what about this software, or that hardware, or this drone, and all these different options. We were able to choose what we felt like made the most sense for what was in front of us. So, but yeah, so that's kind of why we did it. What were the reasons behind why we went out there, and hopefully that makes sense for what you're asking. But as far as like what we were able to accomplish while we were there, in the very beginning, it was, hey, let's go, let's put these out here. Let's say, okay, we got, we have an area that we want to cover. How are we going to cover it? Is it going to be, a few drones in this area spread out, or are we going to try to cover a main area first, and then expand and grow that area slowly from, that perimeter? And I think what we just chose, hey, let's cover the worst areas, but let's make sure that they're all connected, so that there's a bit of overlap. So everything was all about like, hey, how do we set up the overlap? How do we make sure that We get the connectivity. And for the record, like none of this, this was a little bit easier because it was an emergency situation, like meaning, hey, they really still needed help at the time, even if we were a couple of months after the fact. They really needed help on like the visibility side of things, and it was becoming a big issue for them. And I'm not saying that everything that we did solved everything. That's not what I'm trying to profess, but it was one of those where it's like by putting this into place, I think it really helped get the rest of the city on the same page with 3D maps and models, and get everybody kind of access to and visibility in places that I thought they thought were difficult and needed assistance at. So once we kind of figured that out, then it was all right. Well, let's get some more drones there. Let's get some more docks there. Let's see what else can be done, and we kind of went from there.
So because like the deployment went at such a big scale, like what turned out to be the hardest for you? Like was it the technology or was it the process or was it the people, like convincing people that we'll be flying autonomous drones over you on a daily basis? So what was the hardest part of the process?
I would say the hardest part of the process was probably it's not. I don't know that this was hard. It was just like a task. It's like something that had to be done. But it was one of the harder parts of the process is just like who are you going to work with, and what relationship does that create, and how do you position all the correct people and stuff. And this is where I think maybe we'll talk about this a little bit later, but sometimes the relationships and the people that you're coordinating with and like the so we chose to use a lot of, and this has always been our vision, but we chose to use a lot of like retail centers or local businesses and stuff like that. So I think picking the location in Asheville, actually, this is one of the more difficult things that I think is maybe situational, but plays in line with why the other thing I'm talking about is difficult. But it was just like you have hills, and you have difficulty with like signal with the drone, stuff like that. So it's I think choosing the location, where they're at, how much putting a grid pattern in place and picking places you think that are going to work is easy enough to do. But then like real world stuff, there's interference that comes into play, or there's something that'll happen, I think that makes it slightly more difficult. But I think that's where I'm trying to say that the relationships of building key relationships with people, where even maybe they had multiple locations that you could utilize, or they are really interested in doing this because you help their actual business, like which places are you choosing, and what does that get you relationship wise? How does that help them, and then how does that help push the next phase? Like how do we make sure it makes sense for everybody in that situation and moving forward, and what does that look like? So I think it's not like it's too difficult, but I think it's just that's part of like the harder part of the process when you're doing something that's in a populated area with a number of people. It really takes an understanding of like how to combine and put all those people together, and say what does this do, who's in coordination, and how does it help us, and how does it help the city and the DFR program, all that. So
yeah. So now that we are flying, now that we are, talking about flying over a complete city with multiple docks in place, what was the choice between the hardware, the software, all the communication links, the internet? Even the internet is a big problem for some people. And how did you manage to get the BV loss waiver? Because that is a question for multiple people out there. Like, what do you do for BV loss? So, what was your whole process in, getting all those things set up and getting all those things coordinated and done?
So we have our own version of the BV loss waiver, but Asheville had already. This is where I try to be really upfront and clear about this. Asheville's been on a path with drones anyway. That's why we were able to choose and work with them. It was a great opportunity to do that because they already had, and I think I can't honestly remember the exact timing, but it was either like by the time we got there or just before, something like that, that they had already gotten a BV loss waiver. So it was something that they had their own COA. They have their own situation. And so what we were doing is when we're flying with them, obviously we work with that with the actual like the setup as far as like hardware and software. I think we knew from the beginning, obviously we were bringing out, the DJI stuff, but I think for me, the software, and I realized we're on like we're on a FlytBase webinar, and we're sitting here talking. I think the answer is obviously, hey, FlytBase helped, but the truth is that there's a bunch of different options, and there's a lot of ways that you can go. But for me, again, it was, how do I set up something that is like that will coordinate with different softwares and different like if I want to in the future have different modules that we create. And is there a company that I feel like will be along with us along that ride? I think for us, it was the reason why I really chose FlytBase is because we were doing something that's not a fully this wasn't like a really high. This is a really low cost situation where we're trying to get it done for relatively cheap. And this is why I like FlytBase. And I don't know if this, I'm sure this is like, it's not something I want to like go off on and say, oh, FlytBase is cheap. That's not. It's that there are different options and there's ways to do this where you guys were like, hey, let's make this happen because you understood what we needed to accomplish, and it was a good way to test a lot of things. But when you want more integrations, FlytBase is like hands down what I feel like is the best for integrating all these different things. And I felt like with the support that you guys provide and the amount of people that you guys have and all that, it was a great selection for doing it. Now, we actually tested a bunch of different softwares, and we like a lot of different softwares, and they have different use cases and stuff. So, but when you ask about what would I choose, it's kind of difficult to manage, like who's getting access to what, and the live feed sharing, or where does media go, and how does it happen autonomously, and there's all these questions that start to pop up that, like, if I'm with a retail store or something, how do I share that information to them, and how do I support them without getting them into the program? And there's a lot of difficulties that I feel like you don't think about too much. Like we knew going into it we were going to think about it, but for me it wasn't as much of a waiver situation, or like all that stuff matters, but it was like, hey, when we were flying, who's doing what, who gets access to what, how do we share this information? And I feel like that's where FlytBase really came in to help with making sure that we could coordinate multiple docs, and that the access was there, and that we could then take all that information and then provide that back to our clients with ease. So I don't know if that answers the question, but it was the DJI systems. They're obviously, I understand what's going on in the world and all of that, but that's what I think is awesome, is that there's a lot of other locations, there's other countries and that can benefit from the same type of thing. And that's, so even if the US is dealing with something, I think that it's still their hands down, like, amazing drone and dock system. And I feel like for what we needed to have multiple different types of capabilities, it was great for what we needed. And they're an awesome company that want to keep innovating. So we, I think that plus you guys and being the flexibility that comes with it was just, it was huge. So, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for all the positive feedback. But what I would like to get to is that you proved autonomy under a crisis condition, because the deployment in Asheville, it was an emergency response situation. Like everything was like there were, I know from the videos that we saw together that there were cars underwater under a river, and there were multiple things, like there were things that were submerged. So it was kind of a crisis situation. But now, like, what happens when you take that same thinking into a much more calmer and a much more everyday environment, like a campus, for providing perimeter security, for providing surveillance? So, how does those things change according to you?
And I guess I'll speak on, like, how does that translate into what campus security and stuff like that looks like. I think the reason why we kind of reference Asheville is because we were able to do a lot of testing with campus environment type situations. So and I think it translates in a lot of ways, because again, it's there's DFR, and that's where I'm like, everybody can talk about DFR. I think it's awesome, and it's like, it's definitely something that there's so, even if it's like, hey, there's a lot of departments who are working or getting into it and it seems like it's common, there's still so many that need, a lot of help or don't have, as much of the money to do it. I think there's like a balance or a benefit to using DFR and coordinating that with schools. And I think that's what was helpful that's how for us, it was an easy transition. We're able to use what was established in Asheville to assist the campus. But then what I feel like, and if that was, let's say I didn't, none of that was my, well, I mean, it was definitely, part of our idea and our purpose in the beginning, but even if Asheville could have handled that, because they're like, oh, we could have stuck a doc, at a school or something, right? I think what we were doing made it easier because it allowed us to say, hey, it's not just DFR, and it's not just school incident response. There's all these other things that go along with it, and I think that's where what we did in Asheville with 3D models and like tracking conditions and managing or oversight surveillance over properties, stuff like that. All that applies and plays into the campus situation. So if you take different categories of what can be done by a drone, I think that's where I feel like a lot of times people look at like a drone and they see video and images, and I feel like there's a lot more that can be done when it comes to having drones at the school. So it's not just as much incident response. There's obviously disaster, and that's proven, that why it's helpful. And there's incident response, and obviously, especially in the news in the world today, there's plenty of reasons why that makes sense for the campus situation. But I think what was really cool about what we were able to do in Asheville is just be able to say, hey, whether or not it's at the campus, there might be support from a location that's nearby the campus as well too. So it's not just whether or not it's on site. And can you coordinate multiple agencies, or can you coordinate to where that agency is helping or like assisting with that campus security. So it's again, like, how does that translate? What do we learn? How does that kind of play into all the campus side? I think it's just, hey, there's all these different groups that can work together for the better of it. There's options of software and hardware. And then on top of that, like, you don't even have to have it necessarily at the school. You could be really close or nearby, or have coordinating partners that are again, like retail centers or property owners or something that might be interested in their own options, but it's not something that's like full only campus, and maybe it's used in multiple businesses or local areas and stuff. And so I think that's what we got to prove a lot with Asheville, is just how it can all work together, and then how many different sides of like drones and what can be accomplished with drones that go along with security as well. So it's the full solution rather than hey, we surveil or we respond. It's not just that. So I think that's what's cool, what was proven by Asheville in that whole disaster situation.
Yeah, no, that really makes sense. And if, let's say, if any university, any campus, like any manufacturing unit, is supposed to call you tomorrow and say that design a plan for us for a campus security, a complete drone-wide campus security, what would your first version of that look like?
Oh, man, I feel like it could get super complex, and there's like I don't know how deep how deep do you want to go is the real question. But it's let's see. So it depends on the size. It depends on a lot of things. But let's just say, hey, it's they wanted a couple different docs. They wanted something that could be a common thing is like, hey, maybe some type of software and hardware that's combined to be able to recognize other drones in an area, right? You don't need to do anything crazy. You don't need to be able to mitigate, the drone, or maybe you don't need to go as far as like airspace deconfliction and with like intense solutions or anything. Maybe it's just as simple as understanding who's in the area or being able to see that visually, connecting that integration to FlytBase, being able to say that you've got two docks there so that one can take over when the other one can't. Maybe you have, if possible, if you're in the country or if you have the right software, maybe there's a way to get some type, like to ensure either you have that you can cover like the entire campus no matter what without any kind of interruptions with the drone. There's not like what you call like blind spots or something like that. So I mean, our goal would be look at the campus, make sure you don't have blind spots. You have to kind of almost test it out. Maybe you get a pilot out there to go do some testing prior to, you figure out what that campus needs, what the solution looks like, figure out how many docks, pick the software. Obviously, if it's flight based, then you understand like who can be coordinated with that. How are you sharing? So we like to call it like multi-agency access. It's, do you get the police involved in that? Do they have access to the drones, or do they get the live feed shared to them? Do you set up an integration inside of FlytBase that you say, hey, they're going to get sent this live feed anytime this drone is launched? Do you do like a text to fly or some kind of like alarm response? But if that's the case, who's getting that alarm and who flies? There's a lot of decisions that have to be made. If it was like a campus today and it was simple, maybe they start with one drone dock and they have it available to cover that whole area. But I mean, if you're going to do that, obviously you need to talk about parachutes. You need to talk about your waivers and all of that, which I think that's just a standard part of the process. But if you're like, what's the actual solution? I think you have to look at your systems and look at like what can you, if you're going to spend the money to put it in place, what can you connect to it to ensure that you're getting the most out of it is really my question. And that's why again, I realize I'm on this call, but that's why I like you guys, because it's easier for me to say, hey, let's put this together, connect that, or do this camera system. It's really nice to be able to make those decisions and know that I have the software and the developers to back up, connecting those and stuff. So I don't know if that totally answers, but I think that's what we would want to do. And it really depends on scale. There's a lot of things that could be done for larger scale, multi-docs and coordination and yeah, he said complex audience here. Yeah. And that's really kind of what I'm saying is it's not necessarily one size fits all, but you have to understand there's like these maybe, 6 or 8 different categories of things you have to address. And then what makes sense and what stack you're going to run,
Yeah. So you did mention about blind spots and covering, all those areas, because definitely CCTV cameras or foot patrol cannot do everything. So what are the current gaps that you see in campus security? Uh, what are your main observations on that?
I don't want to ruffle any feathers or anything, so we're gonna keep it as I don't know, simple as possible, I guess. But like, I'm not, I think there's there's people that do it well, and they're probably have a lot of visibility and all that. But I think a lot of times supporting the actual guard on site or security, supporting them with like an aerial asset would be just awesome in general, no matter what. Like, because no matter what you respond to, having an aerial asset in sight. I know this is like I'm just I'm regurgitating the common stuff to be said, but that's why people like drones. Being able to say, hey, we understand what's happening from a different perspective and relaying that information directly to the guard, or letting that person who's responding to an event see it directly on their iPhone or their iPad. I think to me that's like where a big gap is. A lot of times somebody's responding to something and they don't get to see the situation from a different perspective. And I feel like if there was safety is what's first, then to me, understanding what I'm running into or what other potential risks there are, what do I not see? Everybody, for the most part, we hope and assume things are simple and as they seem, but they're not always. And I think that's where like, maybe having that situational awareness, again, it's just having a drone in the sky helps. Yes, I know that's what I'm saying. But I think that's the biggest one. It's just if I'm a security, response in a situation at a school, I would love to know that I got backup that is not necessarily like, yes, another person, great, fantastic, but another perspective that helps me see potential risks and like respond or make decisions based on that is, I think, where it's huge. The other side, of course, I think, we're just talking about like gaps and stuff. I don't know this is much of a gap, but like pre-planning, I think, is a big one that, people don't talk about a whole lot. And it doesn't, if you have a drone on site, it doesn't take much to be able to do a full scale digital twin of the college, right? So let's say you do an entire digital twin, you understand like again, if I'm just going off of like, I know we're in the States and we deal with some of this stuff, and maybe others don't as much, but let's say there's an active shooter or an event or something that happens that's something nobody wants to deal with. What do you have 3D models? Do people have the ability to look at that campus in a perspective and be able to say, hey, like, if I'm over here, where are my best access points? Like, they might have a map or they might have a top down, but do they have the ability to really kind of like take a second to stop? And I know maybe you don't have a second a lot of times, but sometimes you do. And I feel like there's nothing wrong with, once you have the drone on site, you can easily put a 3D model in place, a digital twin. You can analyze things. You can pre-plan ahead of time, to where you don't have to take the time to look at it right then, but you understand, based on the planning and the tools that you have in place, that you can analyze it a certain way, come up with your designated, plans for response, but it's in coordination with and in support of the, 3D model. And we have software that we work with that can then say, hey, this is the angle that this person's going to be at. I'm like, let's say you have an event. I'm just talking about realistic stuff that's kind of happened recently, but if there is an event, you should be able to have a 3D model of that area. It could be done by drone that's already on site, and then you already know what the distances are, what the heights are. This is like, it gets down to very, very, I don't know, I know maybe some people know this, but it can get very, very realistic on the measurements and all that. So it's stuff that I think people in the DFR space and security space, they understand the drone side, but I think that what the gap is all the connected stuff that can help assist that with technology that you use by utilizing stuff like mapping and digital twins, stuff like that, and then using software that uses that to analyze the situation. So I think that's where a lot of growth could happen, is just understanding that. But then if that's the case, maybe you place cameras in different places. Maybe you can pre-plan that stuff to where you understand how to integrate your other systems better, because you're realizing and seeing gaps that you've found because of you're using the drone to help put a whole perspective into place. So I don't know if that's helpful. I feel like that's what we kind of see a lot right now. That's we feel like there's some gaps in.
Yeah. So from the camera systems, the CCTV camera systems, and the maybe different sensors that usually people put in place currently for their security purposes. What do you think about a drone automatically taking off whenever an alarm gets triggered, and then the security guard also gets notified of the video feed that he can watch, like having situational awareness of the whole site at that particular instant? Because usually these days, when there is no drone in place, response times usually take between 5 minutes, like that's an average, if it's a large site. But if it's not, if it's a drone which is flying at 30, 40 miles an hour, how fast can it go and reach that particular location and give the guard a security, or give the guard the situational awareness? That would be pretty cool. So where I'm coming from this is, do you see, from the deployments that you have done previously at Ashwell, do you see any parallels between 911 calls coming in and the public safety responders sending out the drones to those calls, and the alarm triggers at large campuses?
Yeah, and I do. I think the difficulty is like, who is in charge of the drone? What command center are they operating out of? Are they staffed in all the time? How much does that cost somebody? Are there partners you can work with like us that say, hey, we can help you with that? There's other companies that do that stuff. It's you have to look at everything and pick. Again, it's like kind of doing an analysis and saying, hey, what's our situation, and what do we feel like is doable for us or not? And maybe something happens and you get your first win, like I originally talked about, and then you grow from there and you increase or whatever, right? But I think, but if you're gonna say, hey, like what you probably should get it to where, if it was me, I think an automatic launch or an automatic alarm and automatic trigger would be like best case scenario is anytime something happens, there's an alert, alarm, it launches. And anytime something happens, there's companies out there that can help with even 911 response, where we're setting up in another area with us where if there's a 911 call that's even placed on a campus, that is directly linked. And I can't remember if I was talking to you about that, or I know maybe I think it was somebody else, but they're FlytBase is working on our connection with that, to where it's just information, and you guys set that information up as an alert, an alarm, a trigger, and then that information, the second that call is made, and you could designate an area. So if you had a campus, you could designate a campus and say, hey, we want to know anytime 911 is called, that gets done. And I'm not speaking for everybody, and I don't know about local laws and regulations and all of that. So I'm just saying that ideally, if there was a problem or a call that went down, you can set this up to where you can say, hey, there's different zones. How many zones do you want? Which zone, does the security guard, are they trained, or is somebody trained on knowing what zones they are? If you just ran like a 4-zone grid, and you're like, hey, there's zone 1, 2, 3, or 4, you can keep it as simple as pushing a button and launching it to one of those zones based on who the security guard is or where they saw a problem. I mean, you and I did this on one of the schools where we had a drone. It was in the air, and it was in the air, I think, in 20 seconds. It was something, I think it was like 20, 25 seconds or something. It was like less than 30 seconds, and it's in the air, but it's not only in the air, but it's headed to the location that we designated as the zone. So it already on a pre-designated mission. Of course, the difficulty with that is like situational awareness. Do you have a pilot that's on that the second that if that drone launches? I mean, are you filling your requirements, or this is where, if you say, oh, that's difficult, and you have that attitude, then you don't understand that there's people that have command centers that are full time. You could have a command center where you have 2 people on, the entire time. Maybe the guards, maybe they shift in and out of who's watching, but we train pilots to understand. Like, if they're guards, can we train them to be pilots as well? And if they have, maybe they switch in and out, or they switch out with the other guards on who's watching that. There's all kinds of setups that are being created and put in place right now, and that's where I'm like, to me, it's not a comment or a question of, oh, that's difficult. It's no, you need to figure out your situation and what you need and what you can afford, what you can accomplish, or are there partners, somebody that can help you get to that, and then that's where you take action and you at least get started on it, so that you can say, yeah, this is what we currently do. I mean, in Asheville, just to bring it back to that, is they don't. It's not a. I don't know how much I totally want to say this, but it's not a full staff thing all the time at all hours at night or anything. They have limitations because they would have to spend a ton of money to get to that point. I think that's the goal for them. But right now they're running a great system, and it's based on what they can accomplish at the time, and they've grown. That's why, again, we were able to start with a few, and we ended up with a bunch. And that's where I feel like with the campuses, you have to, all those alarms, alerts, all that stuff, you have to start with where you feel like you're most comfortable with, and where it's going to make sense to get you the wins. And then you say, yeah, all right, that worked. Let's expand, or let's grow, and let's put the plan in place to go from there. But to say that you can't staff it, or it can't be, if you have, like, the fact that anybody could call 911 and there's an alarm or alert and something can go out just based on somebody's call, or just based on a lot of triggers that you set up, I think is just amazing. And it totally takes away or it helps. It takes the burden, is what I'm trying to say, off of the DFR side, or not the DFR side, but the police response side, and the security and incident response, and really assists with the DFR side. Whether or not the police even have that in place, I think that's where, like, even by doing this, if you were a first person in your city or in your area to do it as like a campus, I don't think you should also decide, wait, or to let the police do something. I feel like, get with somebody who knows what they're doing, and give us a shout, or give somebody a shout that knows what they're doing, and say, we want to move forward with this. What you're going to find is the police and everybody else that are connected to you are going to fall in place, and they're going to, like, start with something. You got to start with something so that others will follow in your lead. So yeah, I think whole lot can be done. It can get very complex, and that's what I think is awesome. But again, it's just like picking your stack initially, figuring out what works best for you. You know.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. So now that we have covered the what, let's talk about how you think, like whenever you build, systems like this. So I will like to segue a little towards FlightBase. So, like you've used FlightBase with DJI Docs in the projects that you're currently working with. Why that combination? Like, what problem did it solve for you, and why are you choosing us?
And I think I've gone. I'm like touching on a lot of this here and there with
Yeah.
some of the stuff. But I mean, if you had to just ask me one thing, I would say it's flexibility. And I'm not, I'm being non-specific here. We can get into more specifics if you want, but it's the flexibility side that I really liked. It's the U.S. Based company side that's great. It's knowing that I can take a solution or a system like another drone dock or another system that's in place and then integrate that. I feel like that's helpful for us to understand that we've got like a partner that can support whatever type of program we want to put in place. It allows us to customize, and I think that for okay, so you talk about like what else? For me, it's the data security side. It's making sure like there's a lot of people that don't even need it, don't care so much. But again, when I do have somebody that cares, it's helpful to be able to talk about that and be able to say, yeah, we've got that figured out, and it's for us to be able to say, hey, we have something figured out, or we have the ability to do whatever. That's empowers us to be able to go after programs and solutions that it's going to be a lot more difficult. I mean, there's companies that I absolutely love that have amazing doc software, and like and this is where I think like for us, when you get into these situations like what we're all talking about here, I think that the flexibility side and being able to integrate all these different things and really coming up with more of what I like to call like an ecosystem. I know I'm not unique in the way that I'm talking about that, but for us, it is an ecosystem. It's how do you take everything and put it all together as a fully comprehensive functional suit solution. And okay, something might not be completely solved. If that's the case, what I really like about you guys is usually you guys will say, "Hey, let's figure it out. Let's put it in place, or let's program it." And then on top of that, and I know I'm on this call with you guys, but you guys always have people who are ready to do something. You have availability. You're always you're talking to us. You're working with us. There's never been a time either where I feel like you guys aren't willing to do something and able to do it because you have a team behind you that um, that like I guess there's enough of you to tackle anything that we're looking for. But I think it's just super helpful. So yeah, there's a number of different reasons, and I know none of that's really specific, but that's kind of what I feel like the answer is, because if you get into specifics, I feel like you guys probably are going to be like, yeah, we can handle that. Yeah, we can help. Yeah, like no matter what you ask, you guys want to try to help, and that's what I feel like really is the answer. So specifics wise, I think all the alarm integrations are amazing. I love the flexibility of setting a lot of that up. I think that again, just if I ask for something specific, you guys are super helpful. So.
Yeah, no, that's really awesome. Thank you so much again. So I have one closing question, which might be quite insightful for multiple people watching this webinar right now. What's the one mistake that people usually make when they are deploying systems of such large scale? Uh, and what is the one mistake that you made last year that you would like to avoid?
It's a good question. Um, so if I'm thinking about like, mistake that people make, I would say, um, I think this is again, maybe it's instead of looking at a solution, people will sometimes look at like who they're already working with or something. And it's, I don't know, they go with what's easiest and what's like in place. And I feel like that to me, I know it sounds, maybe this is like pulling this out of nowhere, but just going with like the easiest and most connected or currently available to them type of solution is a mistake in my opinion, because even if you're like, well, FlytBase takes, maybe it's going to take a lot of like coordination or trying to figure it out or whatever. I would say the mistake would be is not trying to figure out what can or can't be done, and really go like, again, bringing this back to Asheville, what the thing that I feel like they really do well is they will take anything, anywhere, anytime, any software, any drone, anything, because they want to figure out what works and what doesn't work, And I think that's what's like, to have that kind of open mind is, I think, what's most important. Whereas a lot of times people are looking for, hey, I want, they'll take what is offered to them or somebody they know or something, and they'll go with it, and totally fine. But I think sometimes the mistake is, even if not paying attention to all the connected environment of, again, like the public, and what about the students, and maybe there's a way to help the students out and get in with helping them on the curriculum side. What if you could get interns from being out of campus? Let's talk about just in campus in general, but like, what about all the connected businesses that are nearby? What about like not considering all that stuff? To me is a mistake, because again, if you're just got a lot of money and you don't care and you just want to solve this one solution, no problem. But I think people miss a lot of times is not considering a lot of that. So, um, as far as us, one of the bigger things that we had to kind of just deal with and figure out is just some of the IT stuff. Was like things that get your way that you have to try to tackle, figure out, and things that just you're like, man, this is the third time I'm trying to make this work, and I think that was something to where we didn't expect as much of that as what I think maybe we would know now, of course, but that part. But I'm saying, as far as that side, even like Starlink was an amazing option for us, But it was as much of an option as it's also, you can't, it's a temporary solution, and the transitioning out of that faster would be, and I'm not saying it's bad and it doesn't work, but there's a little bit of lag, or there's different things where most of the time it works great, but I think even that degrades the performance overall. So if you were using something like Starlink, it works great on construction sites and it works great in a lot of scenarios. But I think just really, really paying attention to your entire like IT, internet, connectivity, all of that. If you make sure that's a robust plan and that's guaranteed always going to work, that's obviously never a guarantee. But I'm saying, if you really put a lot of time into making sure that's a proper solution, I think that's it'll help you mitigate some of the struggles or the difficulties that come with things that go down that you're just like, well, man, I had no idea that was even a potential problem. So yeah, just sorry, my dog barking. But that's like that was a huge thing for us that just kind of caused like, something goes down. Is it the drone that turned off, or we don't know exactly what went down, if it was a Starlink issue, or is it a something on site, or is it something that is there something happened to the drone dock, so I think that would maybe even a backup potential option, like if you have one network, you could put a backup on it, and then just kind of protecting that whole environment, I think is going to be a key thing that I don't know, it's as much of a mistake, but we just weren't aware as much on what needed to happen in order to kind of protect those systems no matter what. And there's nothing really bad that happened to it. It's just some of the difficulties that come with running equipment on the internet and all the random stuff that can go down. So
Yeah. No, thank you so much for the insights. I hope the audience enjoyed it. I think we have one or two questions in the Q&A tab from Paul. So, for the campus, do you also need a drone cat flap so that they can access the campus? I think he's talking about indoor campuses. The drones that we are using right now are for outdoor. So, I'm not sure how we will be able to answer that. But
Pet flap. Is that
yeah,
like, is that like that's like a doggy door, huh? Uh,
yeah,
it's interesting. I don't think we're that far off from having the indoor capable stuff. I know of multiple that are building solutions or trying to accomplish that, and that's kind of where I feel like we really try to stay on the forefront of like the being aware of what technology is being worked on or not. So I think
yeah,
it's not far off. Even if this particular one that we've been talking about is not indoor. There's he's he mentioned the Slam solution. Um, as far as that goes, I think there's a couple different companies that are working through that to ensure the environment, being able to navigate it, making sure they don't lose signal with the drone, all that stuff. So I think it'd be interesting to see where that goes as far as like the interior side. But again, if there was a situation like, let's say you have to coordinate an outdoor dock and an indoor dock, unless you're using the same company, same software, same everything, and it's all in one solution, you're going to be using multiple systems and multiple softwares. So who are you connecting with that can integrate the best with that? That's really like would be my next question. And then obviously that's why I kind of like working with you guys, because that's where I'm going to go. Hey, I found this random drone and this random dock deep. Can you talk to your guys? Can we see if we can integrate this? And that's where I feel like you guys are one of my favorite when it comes to that. So
yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Reese, for all the insights that you shared today in this webinar. Thank you for walking us through how autonomy actually gets built. For everyone listening, this wasn't a theory; it's a field-tested playbook that you can start applying today. If you guys, wish to have autonomous drones on your campuses. So again, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Reese, for being a part of this webinar, and thank you so much, Shruti, for coordinating this. So yeah, hope to see you all soon in the next webinar. Have a nice one.
all right, thanks.
Thank
See you
you,
guys.
everybody. Thanks, Reese. Yeah, have a great day. Thanks, Deep.
If you have any questions, just reach out to us on flightbase.com. Uh, More than happy to. Yeah.
All right, cool.
Yep.
Thank you guys.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.